Hello everyone, and welcome to TBR's webinar, Hybrid Integration is the Driving Force Behind Cloud Landscape Evolution. Principal Analyst Alan Kranz and Senior Analyst Jillian Morandi. I'm Justin Sargent, and I'm hosting today's webinar. TBR's 2H14 Hybrid Cloud Customer Research Report indicates 22% of the large enterprise market has integrated cloud across their IT environment, creating a $7 billion hybrid integration market in 2014. Demand for integration will increase over the next 4 to 5 years as the enterprise market purchases cloud and then integrates it to optimize efficiency, productivity, and cost. Infrastructure is the place most enterprises begin their hybrid cloud integration, followed by platform and lower risk applications. Now before I pass this over to the analysts, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the material we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments through the Q&A or chat function. We'll address them at the end of the webinar or reach out directly to any of us to set up a discussion. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webinar within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find the slides, as well as our thought leadership pieces, other webinars, and commentaries on SlideShare at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. Now let me introduce the team presenting today. Alan Kranz is Principal Analyst here at TBR and leads TBR's coverage of the technologies and business models at play across the cloud computing landscape. Alan's background includes analyzing the business models of leading IT providers such as Microsoft, EMC, and IBM for more than 10 years. He uses that experience to guide TBR's cloud research agenda. In addition to leading TBR's syndicated cloud research, Alan engages with clients on custom projects to identify, align, and capture opportunities presented by customer migration to cloud computing services. Alan frequently presents at client and industry events and is quoted in industry publications such as the Boston Globe, eWeek, Investors Business Daily, and Business Week. Jillian Morandi is a senior analyst in TBR's cloud practice responsible for analyzing key vendors in the market. She analyzes vendor, partner, and developer ecosystems, go-to-market strategies, resource management, financial investment strategies, and geographic strategies of the cloud market. Jillian is a lead author on several TBR syndicated reports and benchmarks and works with numerous large and small clients on custom projects and consulting. Jillian's analytical commentary has been quoted by sources such as the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, CIO Magazine, CRN, CNN Money, The Register, Talking Cloud, and GigaOM. And with that, let me hand this over to Alan.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. So throughout today's presentation, we'll show some highlights. As Justin mentioned, we have an ongoing stream of hybrid cloud customer research where we're collecting surveys as well as interviews from adopters and evaluators for hybrid solutions. And we also have a stream of vendor coverage that looks at the supply side of this market, so the types of strategies and offerings that are being offered to customers, and so we can look at both sides of that market with today's presentation. And so as we start off, kind of a really interesting market in terms of where it's at in its evolution, that for a relatively new space, you can see that reflected in terms of the disconnect between what's being provided and messaged by the vendors and what customers are actually doing with these technologies and these services. And so right now there's still a lot of kind of internal evaluation for vendors in terms of how do we take what we're doing and align it to this opportunity which can connect between clouds as well as on-premise and do it in a way that we can monetize and have an advantage. And on the part of customers, there's a tension because part of the benefits of hybrid for them is to get some type of standardization and portability for the cloud environments that they've built up and begun investing in over the past 10 years. So you have this tension and evolution in terms of what the right offer is from the vendor side, what the right method is in terms of bundling that with the cloud services, selling it independently, being an independent broker. There's just a lot of different options still at play today in terms of how to monetize this. And then still on the customer side, a lot of uncertainty in terms of how hybrid is going to fit into their cloud evolution, how deeply it's going to be penetrated, because for, Justin mentioned the 22% of large enterprises today, those are really the bleeding edge adopters that through a lot of investment, a lot of internal building and resource and skills being built up, the initial deployments for hybrid environments have not been achieved easily or cheaply. And so going forward, in order for hybrid to really have a more profound impact on the market, there's going to be a shift in terms of both how customers use it as well as what's needed on behalf of vendors so that they don't have to go through the struggles that those early adopters in the largest of large enterprises have had to go through. They need a more automated platform-based way so that they can achieve the benefits of hybrid without having to do it on a custom one-to-one type basis. And so the first topic that we'll look at today, the types of use cases, the way that hybrid is being used within the customers that have been early adopters and really kind of started to develop the market for these solutions. Before we get in there, I wanted to take a step back and really highlight what impact hybrid has in terms of the overall spectrum of cloud, because we've seen starting with public, real shift not only in the technology but also the way that cloud has been purchased in terms of being able to go outside the central IT organization. A lot of that held a lot of benefits for the early adopters, but also some of the downfalls in terms of the difficulty in terms of managing, getting back to efficiency, integrating across multiple different workloads, whether it's other cloud environments or on-prem. All of that starts to lead to what we're seeing customers demand in terms of the functionality for hybrid environments. Secondly, the other trend and market that's really kind of leading us down this path to being able to blend between the different cloud environments is private cloud adoption. For workloads that either have security or performance that aren't a fit with public cloud services, we've seen a tremendous uptick in growth in terms of the adoption of both on-prem as well as the hosted private environments that really were a renaissance for the role in IT in terms of how these services were being deployed and managed within these environments. And then lastly, the impact of hybrid. Certainly, it's a market in and of itself in terms of doing the integration and the management for these multi-cloud and traditional on-prem and cloud environments. But it's also something that is going to influence and change the public and private cloud markets in and of themselves. That we've seen the evaluation for customers that have adopted hybrid technologies and management platforms shift in terms of the types of public cloud resources that are going to be consumed, as well as the vendors in which they're going to interact with. So when we look at the culmination in terms of the hybrid opportunity, as well as the types of management that needs to be deployed to orchestrate that, the traditional tools, the systems integration approach is one that, although it's worked for the early adopters, this modern management that enables customers to have built-in workflows that have scenarios for when services are delivered from a public environment, which public environment that is, and go through that whole automation in terms of the management is something that the tool sets that have provided the levels of integration for static on-prem workloads today are not the ones that customers have been able to easily transition over to pulling in their cloud environments and achieving hybrid integration in a way that enables the flexibility that ultimately they want and desire as a result of this shift, rather than just consuming cloud in different silos. They truly want to be able to have portability and flexibility in terms of how it's managed. And so that's really where the modern management comes in. It's a combination of more line of business influence in terms of the flexibility and ease of deployment, but also on the IT side, being able to meet their requirements for the types of environment, the performance, the security that are really critical when you look at the types of workloads, particularly for private and now hybrid, that are going to be deployed using these different environments. And so that's the market shift. So we think hybrid, not just a market in and of itself, but one that is going to influence the market for both public and private solutions going forward. So when we start to put some numbers to it and look at, where can, from a vendor standpoint, where can they achieve growth in terms of both the traditional, we've included the software market. I think if you look at the hardware and some of the other spaces, services, for instance, that you'll see a similar comparison in terms of, although the scale of the traditional IT markets remains, really dwarfs the cloud side, in terms of achieving that growth, where customers are looking to invest going forward, that being able to deliver in both the public and the managed private have been important markets. These are 2014 growth rates for the full year. And so you can see getting above the kind of base level of GDP in the single digits, that these are critical markets, and it really reinforces the independent competition to capture those dollars. When we looked at both the integration space as well as starting to look at, how much influence is there when we speak with customers, what types of environments in terms of the level of public cloud services and private services that are really seeing hybrid be a critical influence point for how to target that growth. And so you can see it's really kind of a blend between those, but going forward, we think that the impact of being able to deliver the integration portions, the management platforms for cloud environments, through the multitude of different entry points that we'll go through later, but that is going to be something that continues to increase in growth as, the natural kind of maturation of the public and private happen over time, that just as cloud has been a source of growth compared with traditional IT, hybrid is going to be something that extends the growth of cloud going forward and becomes a faster growing subset than the independent services themselves. So as we get into the use cases, I want to pull in Jillian Morandi, who led the publishing of our hybrid customer report and has been interacting with a lot of customers and looking at their feedback in terms of, all right, so the numbers are great, but how are they actually using it within their environments?
Thanks, Alan. So on the left of the screen, you see ideal use cases for hybrid cloud, and we'll go over those in a minute. But on the right, you see today's usage. So this is from our hybrid cloud study, which focuses on large enterprise usage. And as you can see, a lot of the usage is pretty basic for hybrid cloud. It's a lot of sharing compute resources between public and private cloud, sharing storage between public and private cloud, and this allows data to reside in a central repository and then be pulled into public and private clouds as needed. Bursting is another capability that's been happening on hybrid cloud. So if you have a private cloud that you run and there's a peak time, so maybe during the holidays or potentially a call to action from a commercial or a different ad campaign, you can run on the private cloud and then burst onto a scalable, cost-effective public cloud like Google or Amazon and build those bridges. Another use case is management. So you see this on both sides. The management that we're talking about for today's usage is really more about infrastructure as a service. So by combining public and private cloud into a hybrid environment, you can better understand the compute and storage resources, capacity, how things are being used. That will eventually need to morph into a more broader set of management capabilities, and that's in high demand by a lot of the developers and customers we speak with. The last set of hybrid use cases we're seeing today is around disaster recovery and failover. And I think this has been one of the original use cases for hybrid cloud and for cloud in general. 6 or 7 years ago, there was a lot of startups around cloud disaster recovery. So I think it's one of those use cases that makes sense that will continue to happen. But again, it isn't really directly tied to the business outcomes. It's more IT related. Now, if you look on the left, these are a lot of hybrid use cases that the market's talking about, that the enterprises want, developers want, so we'll go through some of these. Development and testing is a huge workload that I think hybrid cloud will be utilized for. So this is both internally, so applications you're developing for your employees, or externally, so if you're developing applications for end users or for your customers. On the internal side, some use cases include developing and testing on a public cloud, so it's more cost effective. You can spin something up very quickly. Developers have been going to Amazon or Google and kind of going around IT to build something and test it, but then when it's ready for deployment, they want to put it on a private cloud. So that's a perfect use case we see quite a lot, developing on the public side, deploying on a private cloud. Another use case is developing on a private cloud, but that it's especially around BI workloads, so develop your application and then to test it, bring in public resources. And then from there, you can deploy it on a public or a private cloud, whatever your business is more comfortable with. For external facing apps, so where there's a third-party end user, a lot of customers, they simply don't want their data stored on a public cloud. So for those examples, you would potentially have your data residing in a private cloud, some compute cycles on public, but for the vast majority, it would be running on a private cloud, but using some public resources. Another use case we're seeing, and I think this will also be, will serve hybrid cloud, is new services. So as Ellen mentioned, hybrid IT, in this case hybrid cloud, is really the end goal for the majority of enterprises. So for new services, we think that most of them are going to have hybrid cloud capabilities. So this could be potentially CRM or an HR suite. For HR, you'll have most of your employee data on a public cloud, and that's fine and safe, but you'll probably want something like social security numbers or any other very personal information on a private cloud. The same with CRM. So you can have most of your customer data on a public cloud, but then potentially credit card numbers or RFPs or very, very sensitive deals could reside on a private cloud. Other use cases are marketing, a lot of transactional capabilities, management. So management is another one I want to hit on a little bit more. As I mentioned, right now there's been consolidation of infrastructure as a service management, and that's really step one in hybrid cloud. What a lot of developers and executives and IT people are really asking for now is that single pane of glass that will look at your entire IT environment. RightScale has started down this path. RightScale manages AWS and quite a few other public cloud and private cloud vendors. They offer professional services to help you do this. But we see a lot of the bigger, more traditional vendors like an IBM or HP really excelling here because they've remained largely vendor agnostic, so they might be the perfect vendor to offer this type of management. But also there's a lot of opportunity for third-party management companies who could kind of sit on top of these different environments and show you what's going on and help you manage. Amazon, I know, has started down this path with Microsoft. So from an AWS console, you can manage Amazon and some of your Microsoft resources. So we definitely see a lot of vendors going down this path, and it will be a differentiator for people who do it first.
So to add a little bit more around from some of the interviews that I've done, that for things like new services, this is where you get into, for a lot of customers, there's on-prem existing software assets that are really core to the business, are not going to be quick to move to a cloud environment. But as they add functionality or connections to any new services around that, what the hybrid initiative allows them to deploy those in the cloud without moving the legacy core sets of applications, so you can modernize parts of different workloads without having to go through a full shift in terms of how the larger portions of that workload are actually being delivered. So it's a intermediary step to a cloud migration. Anything new will go on to a cloud background and integrate in with the larger services, but you don't have to go through the big expense and effort in terms of making the larger transition immediately. Good. So now that we've covered some of the use cases, we're going to go into the next section in terms of how customers want to buy, the types of benefits that they're looking for out as they evaluate these solutions. And as I mentioned in the setup, this is really where when we looked at the feedback around for customers, what do they see in terms of both unique benefits for hybrid as well as things that really kind of shift the way that they're using their cloud environments. You start to see a couple things stand out in terms of where they want to take this, some of the problems and pain points that they believe the hybridization of their environments are going to solve. And so, right up front, the first two, we kind of look at those and say, those are ubiquitous for cloud. Those are attributes of cloud computing rather than something that's truly unique to a hybrid environment. So as we get in a little bit deeper, you start to see what we believe are the more unique attributes for why customers are making these investments, making this change, and how vendors can kind of stay ahead of where they want to get to, because there's this tension between customers. Again, they've really enjoyed a lot of the lower barriers to entry with cloud in terms of shifting CapEx to OpEx, being able to access resources much more quickly and fluidly, but have begun to experience, and this has come up more and more with our customer conversations, that although the barriers to entry are quite low, the barriers to exit are becoming a problem. And as they look at longer term shifting from one platform to another, having more control and flexibility in terms of where things are residing, that the existing structure for the way that they're deploying and managing these cloud resources doesn't allow them to address that. And so being able to have more portable applications as well as data, the standardization in terms of the platforms, the way that they're able to manage and control those are really the two elements that, from a vendor standpoint, again, you see this another shift in terms of customers that have signed up for the cloud environments. They're beginning to scale. They're starting to see the benefits in terms of providing those data center resources at scale. Customers, again, want to shift the game a little bit in terms of having portability. And so I think hybrid is one of the ways that, in the end, customers are going to demand and want to see and shift to providers that can enable more flexibility in terms of how they're deploying and managing these resources. But it also comes in from an application development standpoint with things like Docker and containers. That both of those trends are ones that are going to push customers to those vendors that will really provide them more flexibility and choice in terms of the types of solutions that that are going to be deployed and being used. So to kind of contrast that with how they want to interact, who they're looking for in terms of interacting and consuming these solutions, I'm going to turn it back over to Jill to go through this slide.
So unsurprisingly, most of the hybrid cloud customers, and again, these are the large enterprise customers, are purchasing direct from vendor. That's their preferred method of purchase today, and that's what they're doing. Now, this isn't really surprising because hybrid cloud and cloud in general is still relatively new for a lot of these customers. They're more comfortable purchasing direct. They may have relationships with the vendors. And from the vendor point of view, the vendors are still building their skill sets and ironing out their portfolios of both products and services. I think Microsoft's a good example here. They are a largely channel-driven company, but when they first rolled out their cloud offerings, they did have a direct sales team to better understand the market and iron everything out before turning products over to the channel. I think we see that happening with hybrid cloud. From the customer point of view, it's easier right now to purchase directly from a vendor. They're more comfortable with the vendors and with some of the brands. So IBM, HP, Microsoft have a branded cloud portfolio. These vendors have broad portfolios, so it's more easy to go to that vendor to get multiple different tools across SaaS, PaaS, infrastructure, public, private. Many of them have on-prem. So it really is more of a one-stop shop to really upgrade your IT environment. And also these vendors that have the branded cloud portfolios are building connectors. So they're either automatically connecting their different clouds, or they are acquiring well, a long time ago, but Dell Boomi, IBM Cast Iron. You see these as the top integration tools. So between the broad portfolio and the experience with integrating, it's making more sense today to go direct to the vendor. However, we also see a lot of global SIs offering hybrid cloud, and a lot of customers are going there, or at least are starting to, and we see this as a big channel to hybrid cloud in the future. Companies like Accenture and Capgemini, they have a deep understanding of their current customers' environments. So adding hybrid cloud to their portfolios and doing all the custom integration and choosing which clouds for which workloads, it makes sense for a lot of customers. The GSIs, most of them have a digital transformation group going. So in that transformation, they're bringing in all of these different tools and can wrap them together and can customize for different customers' industries. Now, in the future, I see a big opportunity for niche SIs. So this would be something like a Cloud Sherpas who has built a business around some of the major cloud vendors and has really built up their expertise ahead of global SIs. These niche SIs can combine best-of-breed solutions. So instead of looking at a big branded cloud, they could combine a few smaller, more specialized vendors, wrap them up for you, manage it for you. They also will specialize by industry and region, which are two drivers that I think we'll see a lot of the larger and small cloud vendors really investing in regional and industry expertise. And I think the niche SIs are a little bit ahead of the game there.
Great. Thanks, Jill. So with the last section of today's presentation, I wanted to go through, pull in from our vendor research in terms of, right now it's about looking at the types of groupings for how vendors are attacking this, because as we kind of led in with the intro, this is still a very emerging gray market. It's tough to call out the leaders or even the leading models in terms of how this is going to be consumed. But certainly there are different strategies which we'll go through and contrast that with what we're seeing from customers in terms of how they're beginning their journeys with these types of approaches and vendors, but also look to the future in terms of, as Jill called out, niche SIs, I agree that if you look at orchestration and brokerage, there's going to be the integration and management as well as other value-added services that are going to fill gaps in terms of how customers want to be consuming and using their cloud solutions. So when we look at the market today, we really kind of see three different approaches come out. And there are large vendors, for instance, IBM, that actually play across all three of these different approaches. But different competitive environment, actually different business units many times in terms of how they're messaging and going to market in terms of capitalizing on the hybrid opportunity. So I'll start top to bottom and go through probably the most emergent category of hybrid solutions, an area where if you look at the kind of life cycle for hybrid, there's a lot of focus around messaging, branding, connection between either the solutions that they have or being acquired or rolled out and hybrid cloud environments. And so at this point, there's still a lot of difficulty kind of doing a comparison from a customer standpoint, having an apples-to-apples view of, you know, which manage multi-clouds, which include traditional on-prem. But the first group is really vendors that have broad portfolios and are providing essentially an integrated hybridization of the different cloud services that are being provided. So some vendors have had this built out for a while. Fujitsu and IBM have had the technology and the branding there for quite some time. If you look at both Microsoft and Cisco are at earlier stages in terms of this evolution. They have broader visions for a partner community, their own cloud services, as well as a strong on-prem presence in terms of the software and the infrastructure for IT. So much kind of big grand vision, not there yet in terms of actually being able to deliver, you know, this ease of hybridization that we're calling them branded homogeneous clouds will eventually provide, and we think is going to be a big impact on the future, but still a lot of investing and messaging being done there in terms of the approach for those vendors. For the orchestrators, these are vendors that have, you know, really built their businesses forever in terms of knitting together different solutions, providing managed services, integration work, and, you know, evolving to not only perform integration, but truly be orchestrators of multi-cloud environments. And so it's a person platform supported custom engagement that we've seen a fairly significant portion of large enterprises engaging around. The depth of those I don't think is to the point where you know it will be. We think that there's going to be more demand for the large enterprises to see the management of these environments as well as the integration for hybrid to the SI. So that's going to be a huge opportunity for them as more multi-cloud management and use cases present themselves for the largest of the large enterprises. So with those two, you know, we get down to the integration specialists that are truly focused on making different cloud services and on-prem assets work together, either through pre-built integrations, subscriptions, API management. They're not looking at managing the underlying or delivering the underlying cloud itself. They're really picking off this as a specific pain point and letting customers either manage on their own or work with other vendors in terms of the other kind of value-add services that we're seeing become more and more a part of customer evaluation and adoption for hybrid cloud. So we look at kind of, you know, where we're seeing the levels of customer usage and adoption today. We really start at the bottom with, you know, a number of vendors and customers that are looking at, you know, if they're implementing a specific cloud service, how can they make that work with what they have today or other cloud environments that they're going to be implementing. And so a very tactical, use case specific type approach to doing the integration, using the management, providing big data capabilities on the back end once those workloads are integrated. With the orchestration, we did a study about a year ago. We saw moderate levels of adoption in terms of working with the big SIs to optimize and manage the cloud environments that customers have put in place over the years. So we certainly think that's growing and is going to continue to do so. But the most emerging area of this market, and it goes back to the slide for who customers really want to be interacting with in terms of consuming these services. For a sizable portion of the customer market, they are looking to cede control over and management issues for how to optimize their different cloud services to a third party, and that the providers of those cloud services is a logical delivery person for that value add. And so going forward, as kind of the capabilities reach the levels in terms of the messaging and the value propositions that, the IBMs, the Ciscos, the IBMs, the Fujitsus, those that can provide public-private on-prem mixed, either from a service provider or from their own data centers, that's going to be an attractive value proposition and one that kind of gets the impact of hybrid beyond just those that can build and work with SIs on a custom one-to-one basis to a much broader segment of the population that, will have use cases where public's a fit for a portion of their workload. Other portion is either going to be private or on-prem, but right now there's a big gap in terms of how to actually deliver and make best use of the different options that are available. So with that kind of landscape in place, when we go out and look at, on the left-hand side, who are the customers that are adopting hybrid working with? Now, there's a lot of different categories here that are combined, but you can see already some of the big legacy brands in terms of Microsoft and IBM being pulled in, probably for different reasons. Microsoft obviously has a strong presence in virtualization, systems management, that allows them to go over to hybrid, to pull in the Azure services, and to make those technology connections using their own R&D. So that's, they show up quite strongly. IBM, when we look at the breadth of the portfolio, as well as on the right, calling out, when we looked at the integration specialists that were identified as part of the survey, who are those vendors that, have a specific offering in terms of integrating cloud services or cloud to on-prem together. Big, strong presence for IBM through the cast iron acquisition. And also you can see for Dell Boomi that's probably one of the reasons why they show up as strongly as they do in terms of being a provider for hybrid environments. So we still think that this integration is an important aspect in terms of the market for cloud. It's going to become more difficult to call this out as distinctly going forward as you see more blending and really treating some of the integration today that's productized as a feature for the underlying cloud services going forward. And so looking forward, we truly think that the offerings on the vendor side are going to open up hybrid and the use cases for a much wider swath of the population in terms of the customer sets, in terms of both geography as well as the size component in terms of providing more automated hybrid capabilities to smaller customers that don't have the resources to build and buy their own. And so you're going to see more of those use cases and customer preferences really become distinct as we go forward, because I think when we look at the customer set today, still a lot of uncertainty in terms of where to use it, how to achieve the integration and the management, and how to measure the impact and the results. So those are all still a lot of questions on the customer side, but clearly they see benefit in terms of having more portability, and so that's going to drive the market and change the way that both hybrid as well as public and private resources are consumed going forward. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. I know a number have already come in. So Justin, you want to start with the first question?
Yep, sure. And just a quick reminder, if you guys have any questions, please send them to the Q&A function right now. All right, so our first question is, over time, are you seeing the involvement of GSIs more, or is it staying with the vendors? What's the trend there?
So I think in terms of the involvement of the large systems integrators in terms of performing, enabling hybrid for customers, we've seen that be an early indicator for where customers are going. That for that we've seen more emphasis on behalf of customers for the management of cloud environments, the integration, the optimization, and orchestration. And so I think they were early on in terms of doing this work on a custom basis. And so I think we're going to see more emphasis on platforms and tool sets going forward, but this is no simple task today. And even when we've talked with some of the integration specialists, that the need for professional services around these engagements does not go away. So it's by no means something that commoditizes or takes away the market opportunity for systems integrators to work with large clients to implement hybrid capabilities.
And just to add to that, I think it also depends on the customer itself. So a lot of the customers who want to give up control, who are traditional outsourcing customers, or who are happy to shift part of their IT to a global SI, those are prime candidates. But you're always going to have customers who want to maintain more of the control. So they might build a cloud in their own data center, and for those purposes, they'll continue to buy direct from the vendor.
All right. Do you have any examples of companies where hybrid cloud use cases being discussed or under practice?
So in terms of under practice, I'm going to assume that that's being piloted or used internally before it goes into production. Certainly, we've seen about 20% have actually implemented hybrid production use cases. We've seen a sizable portion, at least that large, so you're talking about up to 50% of the market that's either deploying hybrid in production or piloting it internally, as they kind of lead towards how it fits and where it can be used within their environment. So certainly we're seeing a lot of practice piloting within these accounts before they go live.
Yeah, but again, it is largely on the more infrastructure related side. So we haven't seen a lot of more advanced hybrid capabilities in production, but they are definitely being tested.
All right, next question. Wondering if brand strength is the key here, or is it true preference for a solution?
I mean, I think at this point, I think it started with preference for a solution that the very focused use cases around selling alongside a Salesforce or a Workday, the big public cloud platforms where integration and management is a particular pain point, started that way. But with the awareness of different companies that we're seeing probably over the past year, I'd say, with the push around hybrid solutions really being integrated into the core tool sets, that, the brand, the awareness, the breadth of the portfolio to be able to go out to your existing customer base are all critical, success factors for vendors over the past year.
All right, next question is back on the purchasing slide. You talk about direct from the vendor. Who is making that purchase? The LOB buyer or the CIO IT team?
So this is something that we've tracked in terms of both the private cloud solutions as well as the hybrid, to monitor both the control as well as the influence over decisions for IT versus line of business. And what we saw with hybrid is that, and even so we're doing this over time, every 6 months we're updating it. And so most times, given the types of solutions and the types of technology that's involved, these are not line of business type purchases. These are They may be coming with a need in terms of being more flexible with marketing deployments, being able to do new campaigns or add additional services around business applications. But it's IT that's truly doing the evaluation and controlling more of the outcome from the decision for hybrid environments as well as the private solutions. And not only that, but we've seen over the past 6 months a shift in terms of an increase in terms of the control of IT in terms of these types of decisions. So we think that's going to continue, that given the focus on the technology and the behind-the-scenes management, that really line of business doesn't, speak the same language in terms of or understand the obstacles in terms of how to achieve these solutions, that this is one thing that is going to, further push more of the control that may have been ceded to line of business in the early days of public cloud back to the IT as they need to make these more complex networks of cloud solutions work together.
All right, the next question is, I would have expected that disaster and failover use cases are applied much more since this is a simple add of value without transforming the existing IT. Any idea why this is not the blockbuster?
So I think that was a little surprising for us as well. We're hearing a lot about, I think part of it comes down to, for a lot of the disaster recovery workloads, there's more private cloud solutions that can take that entire portion of the workload off the customer's premises and data center. So it's less of a hybrid solution. It's more of a moving that entire portion. There's not the connection and integration of data and management that you have with the external facing, the different applications and infrastructure that's being used in production.
All right. Great. So next question. So is this workload automation with input from IT and LOB?
So I mean, at this point, I think there's been a lot made of automatic bursting under certain conditions and, the true automation of these hybrid environments. We haven't seen, for most customers, it's very clear from talking to them that this is not something that is very automated at this point. They're still, not as flexible as they'd like to be in terms of when resources are deployed on different environments. So right now, I would say it's the multi-sourcing of different workloads rather than the automation.
And I think for automation, a lot of that is coming from the vendors. So vendors, both on the public and private side, are building in automation. And I think when the management tools improve, that'll really help the end user better automate and move things from public to private. But right now, it's more built in on the vendor side.
All right. The next question is, what about the carriers in the hybrid cloud market?
So, I mean, I think the carriers certainly play a big role here. We have an entire stream of research that actually looks at the telco approach to both delivering as well as optimizing cloud. And I think what we've seen from our research is that the carriers, have been certainly acquired a lot of cloud capabilities. They're big providers. It makes sense to extend that into a hybrid type environment that can blend either the hosted private or public. But another kind of unique value add that they have given their legacy is being the interconnect between different data centers that ultimately is needed to support true hybridization of environments. And so you've seen, from AT&T to Verizon, starting to look at that as one of their unique control points and value adds in terms of enabling a broader network of hybrid services that doesn't happen without the connection between data centers.
All right, well, that's all we have time for. Thank you, Jill and Alan, and thank you, everyone, for your questions. You can follow both of the analysts and TBR on Twitter at the handles listed here, and please check out our pages on SlideShare and YouTube as well. Additionally, before you sign off, we'd like to ask you to take a brief survey about today's webinar. As we research the performance of technology companies, we're also studying how we're helping our clients, and your feedback would be greatly appreciated. We'll leave the chat function on for another minute or so to give folks a chance to ask any last-minute questions. Otherwise, we'll see you again next quarter.